What happened next would change everything they thought they knew about appearances. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished floors of Sterling Trust Bank, where wealth spoke in hushed whispers and marble gleamed under crystal chandeliers. This was a place where appearances mattered, also everyone believed. Sarah Mitchell walked through the heavy glass doors wearing comfortable grey joggers and a simple cream sweater, her chestnut hair loosely braided over one shoulder. At 32, she possessed a natural beauty that needed no enhancement, warm hazel eyes that sparkled with kindness, and a gentle smile that could light up any room. But today, her modest attire would become the source of an unexpected ordeal. Beside her stood David, impeccably dressed in a navy-tailored suit that whispered of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. His confident stride and sharp blue eyes commanded attention, but an urgent international call had just pulled him away, leaving Sarah to handle their important business alone. Little did the bank staff know, they were about to make the biggest mistake of their careers. The mission Sarah carried a leather portfolio containing documents for the Mitchell Children's Foundation, a charitable organization that had quietly donated over $50 million to underprivileged schools across the country. Today's visit was meant to establish a new account with an initial deposit of $2 million for their upcoming literacy program. As Sarah approached the marble counter, her genuine smile met the young teller's confused glance. But before any pleasantries could be exchanged, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing here?" The antagonist emerges. Victoria Sterling, the branch manager, materialized like a storm cloud. Tall and imposing with platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, she wore a charcoal suit that seemed to armor her against the world. Her steel-gray eyes immediately fixated on Sarah's casual attire with undisguised disdain. "This is Sterling Trust Bank," Victoria announced, her voice echoing across the lobby. "We maintain certain standards here." What Victoria didn't realize was that her next words would cost the bank their most valuable client. Sarah maintained her composure, her voice steady and warm. "I'd like to open an account for the Mitchell Children's Foundation and make a substantial deposit." She offered the portfolio, but Victoria didn't even glance at it. Instead, she leaned across the counter, her gaze scrutinizing Sarah's outfit with theatrical disgust. "The humiliation begins. And where exactly would someone like you acquire foundation money?" Victoria's voice rose, turning heads throughout the lobby. "We're a prestigious institution. I'll need more than your word to believe this isn't some elaborate scheme." The crowd began to gather, but they had no idea they were about to witness something extraordinary. A man in an expensive pinstriped suit whispered loudly to his companion, "She certainly doesn't look like she belongs in a place like this." His wife, draped in a designer coat, nodded approvingly as she discreetly lifted her phone to record what she assumed would be an entertaining confrontation. Sarah's cheeks flushed, but she remained dignified. "All the documentation is right here," she said, opening the portfolio to reveal official letterheads and certified documents. But Victoria was just getting started. "The escalation documentation can be fabricated," Victoria declared, her voice now carrying across the entire lobby. She beckoned to a security guard, a burly man named Tony who approached with reluctant steps. "Keep an eye on her," Victoria commanded loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't trust this situation one bit." What happened next would leave everyone speechless. Victoria reached across the counter and swept Sarah's belongings from her hands, her phone, keys, and wallet scattering across the polished floor like discarded trash. "Let's see what you're really carrying," Victoria sneered, as several onlookers gasped at the blatant disrespect. Sarah knelt gracefully to gather her belongings, her dignity intact despite the deliberate humiliation. A young teller named Alex watched in horror, wanting to intervene, but frozen by the hierarchical dynamics of the workplace. The pinstriped man chuckled to his wife, "Probably stolen goods in there." Meanwhile, the woman in the designer coat giggled as she continued recording, whispering, This is going to be perfect for social media. The point of no return Victoria wasn't finished. She grabbed Sarah's portfolio and dramatically flipped through it before tossing it back onto the counter with exaggerated skepticism. This could all be fake, she announced to the growing crowd. People like you don't just walk in with foundation money. What's your real game here? But Victoria had no idea that her worst nightmare was about to walk through those doors. Tony, uncomfortable but following orders, accidentally knocked over a cup of coffee that splashed across Sarah's sweater. "Oops," he muttered, though his eyes showed genuine regret. "Sorry about that." The designer coat woman squealed with delight. "Now she looks even more out of place." While the pinstripe suit man added, "Perfect costume for a street performer." Sarah stood there, coffee staining her cream sweater, but her composure remained unshaken. She embodied grace under pressure, making their cruelty appear even more grotesque by contrast. The entrance that changed everything, the heavy glass doors opened with a whisper, and David Mitchell stepped back inside. He concluded his Singapore conference call, a deal worth hundreds of millions, and immediately sensed the tension in the air. His sharp blue eyes took in the scene. Victoria's accusatory stance, Tony hovering awkwardly, the crowd of onlookers, and most importantly, his wife standing there with coffee stains on her sweater, surrounded by scattered belongings. What he said next would turn their world upside down. "You're speaking to my wife." 5 words, quietly spoken, but they hit the marble lobby like a thunderbolt. The revelation unfolds, the effect was instantaneous and devastating. Victoria's finger, which had been pointed accusingly at Sarah, slowly dropped as if suddenly paralyzed. The smug expressions around the lobby transformed into masks of horror and disbelief. The pinstripe man's jaw dropped so far it seemed disconnected from his face. His wife fumbled her phone, nearly dropping it as the implications crashed over her like a tidal wave. This was David Mitchell. The David Mitchell. David strode forward, each step echoing in the suddenly silent space. His presence filled the room, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of someone who owned half the city's skyline. "What exactly is happening here?" he asked, though his piercing gaze suggested he'd seen enough. Sarah gently touched his arm. "It's all right, David. I was simply trying to open the foundation account." The unraveling Victoria's face had drained to the color of fresh snow. "Mr. Mitchell, I didn't realize." "You didn't realize what?" David's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the silk. "That she's my wife, or that she deserves basic human respect regardless of who she's married to." The crowd was beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. Whispers began rippling through the gathered onlookers as recognition dawned. David Mitchell wasn't just wealthy. He was a financial titan. His investment firm managed over $5 billion in assets, and Sterling Trust Bank held nearly $400 million of his personal fortune. Victoria began stammering, "Sir, I was simply being cautious with bank security." "Cautious?" David's eyebrow raised slightly. "You accused my wife of fraud because she chose to dress comfortably. You scattered her belongings across the floor like garbage. You've humiliated her publicly. That's not caution, Ms. Sterling. That's prejudice." The deeper truth. Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong despite the coffee stain on her sweater. "This isn't about me being his wife. This is about how you treated me before you knew who I was married to. That's the real problem here." Her words cut deeper than any corporate threat ever could. The young teller Alex nodded slightly, having witnessed the entire degrading spectacle. The pinstripe man suddenly found his expensive shoes fascinating, while his wife clutched her designer purse like a shield. David's gaze swept the assembled crowd before returning to Victoria. "My wife runs a foundation that has donated over $50 million to help children who will never set foot in a bank like this. Children you would probably judge just as harshly based on their appearance." Sarah added quietly, "The Mitchell Children's Foundation isn't about flashy displays of wealth. It's about helping people. You never even bothered to ask about our mission." The reckoning begins. The glass doors burst open as if summoned by the chaos. Richard Hamilton, the bank president, rushed in with his tie askew and his face flushed from running. Someone, probably Alex, had called in with news that would give any bank executive nightmares. "Mr. Mitchell, Mrs. Mitchell," he gasped, slightly out of breath. "I came as soon as I heard. This is absolutely unacceptable." $400 million was walking toward the exit, and everyone knew it. Richard shot Victoria a look that could have melted steel before gesturing toward his private office. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as David and Sarah walked through, her joggers and coffee-stained sweater, somehow more dignified than all their designer clothes combined. Behind closed doors in the mahogany-paneled office, Richard closed the door with shaking hands. "Please, sit down. I cannot begin to express how sorry I am about this situation." Sarah settled into the leather chair, folding her hands calmly in her lap. Despite everything, her voice remained measured and thoughtful. "I don't want anything for myself, Mr. Hamilton. But this cannot happen to anyone else, ever again." What she said next would reshape how the entire bank operated. Train your staff properly. Teach them that respect isn't determined by clothing brands or appearances. Create policies that protect every customer's dignity. And I want Sterling Trust to partner with our foundation, provide financial literacy programs, and account access to underprivileged students. David leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of his massive account. "You're holding $400 million of my money, Richard. Make this right, or I'll find a bank that shares our values." Justice served. Richard nodded frantically, already mentally drafting policy changes. "Absolutely everything you've requested. Victoria is suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. This goes against everything we claim to stand for." But Sarah's response surprised everyone. Victoria, meanwhile, was trying desperately to salvage her career. "Mr. Mitchell, please," she pleaded through the glass office door, her perfectly styled hair now disheveled. "I have a mortgage, children to support. I made a mistake." Sarah looked at her through the glass, coffee still staining her sweater, and said calmly, "You didn't make a mistake, Victoria. You revealed who you truly are. But people can change if they choose to." David stood, towering over the situation. "She's right about change being possible, but actions have consequences. Your career here is over." The broader impact. Richard immediately called Tony into the office. The security guard entered with his head hanging low, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "I'm sorry," Tony mumbled, his large frame seeming to shrink. "I didn't know who she was. I need this job to support my family." "That's exactly the problem," Richard replied sternly. "You should treat everyone with respect, regardless of who they are. You're suspended for 2 weeks without pay. One more incident, and you're terminated." The ripple effects were just beginning. The pinstripe man and his designer coat wife slipped toward the exit, their earlier amusement replaced by the sick realization that their behavior had been witnessed and potentially recorded by bank security cameras. Their whispered mockery would follow them home, a reminder of their own shallow judgments. The unexpected grace as they prepared to leave, Sarah paused and looked back through the glass at Victoria, who stood by the teller counter looking lost and defeated. "One more thing, Mr. Hamilton," Sarah said softly. "We're hosting a family literacy workshop next month. Parents learning alongside their children. Victoria is welcome to attend. Sometimes we judge too quickly because we don't understand the struggles others face. Even in victory, Sarah chose compassion over revenge." Richard blinked in amazement, then nodded slowly. "I'll extend the invitation personally." The new beginning. David and Sarah walked toward the exit, his arm protectively around her shoulders. The lobby, which had been filled with whispers and mockery an hour earlier, was now respectfully quiet. Victoria remained frozen by the counter, her suspension letter in hand, contemplating how a morning that began with her feeling powerful had ended with her career in ruins. The young teller Alex watched them leave, already composing the email he would send to corporate about implementing sensitivity training. He had learned something valuable about courage and standing up for what's right. But the real lesson was yet to come. Outside in the morning sunshine, Sarah finally exhaled, the tension leaving her shoulders for the first time since entering the bank. David looked at her with admiration that had nothing to do with her appearance and everything to do with her character. "Are you all right?" She nodded, a genuine smile breaking through. "I am now. It was never about us, David. It was about teaching them to see people differently." The lasting impact within a week. Sterling Trust Bank had implemented the Sarah Mitchell Respect Protocol, a comprehensive training program ensuring every customer received dignified treatment regardless of their appearance or perceived wealth status. Victoria used her suspension period to reflect deeply on her prejudices and eventually requested to attend the Foundation's literacy workshop. It would be the beginning of a long journey toward understanding the difference between judging and serving. The story spread through financial circles, but not as expected. Rather than focusing on the drama, industry publications highlighted the innovative customer respect programs that Sterling Trust had implemented. Other banks began adopting similar policies, creating a ripple effect of positive change throughout the financial sector. The true victory 3 months later, Sarah returned to Sterling Trust wearing the same grey joggers and a simple white t-shirt. This time, she was greeted with warm smiles and respectful service from every staff member. The Mitchell Children's Foundation had partnered with 17 banks to provide financial literacy programs to over 10,000 students. Victoria, having completed her own journey of growth, had become an advocate for inclusive customer service training. The real transformation wasn't in policy changes or corporate procedures. The true victory was in the hearts and minds that had been opened, the prejudices that had been challenged, and the understanding that dignity and respect are not luxuries to be earned. They are rights to be given freely to every human being who walks through any door. As Sarah often told audiences at Foundation events, "We never know what battles people are fighting or what dreams they're pursuing. The clothes someone wears tell us nothing about the content of their character or the value of their contributions to the world." And that lesson, learned in a marble lobby on an ordinary Tuesday morning, would echo through countless lives for years to come. The end sometimes the most powerful victories are won not through force or retaliation, but through grace, dignity, and the quiet strength to remain true to one's values even in the face of humiliation. Sarah Mitchell's story reminds us that respect is not something to be earned based on appearances. It's something to be given freely to every person we encounter. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.